Musician, clearly known to many. I will go next to my brother Abdul Kareem Abdullah, the founder and CEO of the Culture Management Group and the Afrochella Festival. Next, my dear brother Uzo Iwela, author, genius, CEO of the Africa Center in New York City. Next, my dear sister Sheree Robinson, the founder of Tastemakers Africa and a cultural icon in her own right. And then closest to me, of course, our dear sister, Representative Ilhan Omar, who you all know very well. Thank you. So I thought I would just start us off this morning because I'm not sure that everybody means the same thing when they say diaspora. And I like to frame the diaspora for myself and the work that I do really in its broadest sense, right? There is this notion of a historic diaspora, those of us who are the sons and daughters of people taken away from Africa against their will many centuries ago, and then, of course, more recent immigrants to the United States and their children in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. And so the first thing that I hoped you guys could reflect on is what diaspora means to you and how it shapes the work that you do in the world. Can we start with Representative Omar?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is really exciting and an honor to be here and to be part of this conversation. You know, as the first African born to serve in Congress, to have African diaspora descent in Washington is really exciting to have all of you here with us. For me, diaspora is not much different than the definition that you gave. I think that there is a connection that we have, you know, those of us who were born in the continent and folks who were born to the ancestors of those who were taken. I think that there is a bloodline, there is a story, there is a shared history that connects us. I was raised in a very Pan-Africanist family where we had books upon books of, you know, the history of Africa, the folks who lived centuries ago on the continent, our connection to our siblings who were taken from the continent, where they ended up. And I think now as a member of Congress and a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, we have a kinship. And our kinship is deeper than just our skin color. And, you know, I've gotten the opportunity to return to Africa with both the chairwoman of the Africa Subcommittee, Karen Bass, who's now the mayor of LA.
Can you clap for that?
And have now had a term serving under the first Black chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And him and I got the opportunity to go to Sierra Leone, to Liberia, and a few other countries in Africa together. And you can see whether you know, it was our visit to Ghana, to those who have returned to make home for themselves and the way in which they feel integrated into that society, whether it is the folks who make up Liberia, whether it is stories like Gregory Meeks in Sierra Leone. And I think for those of us who have been absorbed into the African American community here, as we made home in the United States, there is a beauty to the story that we all share and the history that we share. And the more that we realize that, the more that we explore that, the more that we celebrate that, the more powerful we become as a collective diaspora.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sheree, what would you say?
One, I just also want to just acknowledge how important this space is that we're in, having this conversation with the history all the way up to the top floor and the anchoring of this space by David Ajayi. It's just such an incredible space for us to have here in this country and to be having this conversation. And just excited to be speaking with all of you. The first time I thought of myself as a member of the African diaspora, I wouldn't have used that language. It was when my grandmother told me that we had to eat collard greens and cornbread with our hands because that's what Africans would do. And she didn't have Pan-Africanist language. She had a 6th grade education. But from like that time on, I knew that I was a part of this culture and this community that was like much bigger than anything that was tangible to me. Fast forward, 2010, I go to Sierra Leone, the first time stepping foot on the continent, and just felt home. Like from the minute I got there, from every person I spoke to, from going up into places far outside of Freetown and seeing photos of then Senator Barack Obama in homes in small villages. It was just like, we are connected. And so I definitely have a global view of what it means to be a part of the diaspora. I've visited Black people in probably 60 countries by now. And in every one, I've learned that there is so much power in our differentiated experiences, whether you're an African on the continent or in all of these unique paths we have are our superpower. It's what makes us a powerful people. And I just want all of us to feel that connectivity in like whatever space we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Uzo.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it's really great to see everybody here. I think you guys should give yourselves a round of applause for being here. This is an amazing, amazing group. And I start there because, and I want to pick up on what you said when you mentioned the word power. So when I think about diaspora, I think the Congresswoman has given, like a great definition. I'm sure you've given a great definition, and I want to just pick up on that idea of power. I think of us, when I think diaspora, I think power politically, as evidenced by our wonderful friend on stage here. I think power economically, and I think power culturally. And I think a lot about how do we use that power. And that's one of the most important things, is how do we deploy ourselves to change the world, to make it much more hospitable, acceptable, and sort of flourishing for ourselves, a group of people who maybe not necessarily had the best hand, whether we're talking about here in the United States or in any of our countries on the continent or in the Caribbean. It really is about power, and that power is collective. That power can be individual, but when collectively utilized, that's what will propel us. And that's why I feel really inspired being on stage with these wonderful people, and then also seeing all of you. It's our power that really shapes who we are as a diaspora, and that will propel us as a diaspora.
Thank you.
Oh, man, thank you so much for having me. So I wasn't born in Africa, but Africa was born in me, right?
That's right.
I'm from the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx to Ghanaian parents. And that was the life that I was used to. I lived in Ghana for several years, and when I came back is when I realized I was the African kid to my friends. And that living of a life in the middle has always been what a definition to the diaspora to me is, because my experience is not different from any Caribbean American or a German that's from Ghana or a German that's from, Congo, for instance, right? I actually saw Fali in Germany, in Cologne this year, and that was an incredible experience to see that there were that many Congolese that were celebrating his music in Germany, and seeing a life different that was, different than the experience I had here as an African American to them having as a Congolese German, and so many shared experiences, right? And I think, when I think of diaspora, I just think a shared history and a shared future, the opportunity of dialogue that we can have, that we're having here because of this amazing summit, to be able to engage in each other, to be able to understand the different experiences that we may have had, but the shared story we can have together if we were to build.
Absolutely. Valley.
Well, merci, I'm sorry, my English is poor, so I'm gonna speak in French, because we speak French and in Lingala, so I don't can speak Lingala, but I'm gonna speak French. Bon, pour moi, la diaspora, je pense que c'est une façon de...
For me, the diaspora is something that represents our countries. It's a family that's outside, that's abroad. It's important that the diaspora also helps in some way its country. And it goes both ways, because sometimes the diaspora, for example, in my case, refers to videos. There's some who have left a long time ago, never came back, but they still maintain those connections. So for me, the diaspora is an image of the country which is abroad.
that the diaspora helps the countries that they're originally from. And I do that through my videos. There are some that they involve lots of different countries, and that's, I think, for me, the most important thing about the diaspora is that it's our family around the world.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. But you know, one of the themes that comes out for me to an extent is this idea of globalism, this idea of power, this idea of cultural embrace and affinity. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is we're not just a beautiful and powerful people, but we are a beautiful and powerful people sitting at the historic U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. Yeah. And so the next question that I'm thinking about is how we leverage the power of the diaspora, as Uzo mentioned, from each of your perspectives to increase economic development on the continent, to improve the United States relationship with African nations, and some of the ways in which, from your unique perspectives, you see that happening, whether it is the creative arts, whether it is through science, technology, travel, whether it is through law and policy and legislation. And so let me start again at the top with our dear sister, Representative Omar.
That's a very loaded question. I would say that first acknowledging that we are leaderful, right? Both the diaspora and folks on the continent are leaderful. And I think it is really important for us to retell the story of Africa and the African diaspora. There is a danger to a single narrative that oftentimes strips us of our resiliency, of our brilliance, of our strength that sort of has penetrated, I think, the narratives that are existing in the continent and outside of the continent, where folks forget that when given the opportunity, we excel. When given the opportunity, we excel. And I think that in countries where innovation is being made, whether it is in mobile technology, you know, my home country of Somalia, barriers were removed, not by choice, but by conflict. But because certain barriers didn't exist, young people were able to be innovators. People are more connected in Somalia than any other country in Africa. And so that tells you how much resilience can exist and innovation. If you think about what is happening in Rwanda with so many people saying it is our opportunity to farm because there is richness in this culture of farming, and you can see a lot of their diaspora here saying, we're going to go to college and we're going to choose, right, to study farming technology because this is something that should be celebrated within our youth and within our culture, and we're going to go back and use these innovations that we learned to make sure our country flourishes. You know, you can look at the sort of opportunities that are being created when people realize that we are capable, and if people just got out of our way, we can achieve greatness. And so I think, you know, we are still dealing with the relics of colonialism. We are dealing with the relics of civil war that have crippled many of the nations on the African continent. But the people are not crippled. That's right. And I think that we have resources and knowledge and opportunities, whether it is advocating for policy, like many of the diaspora do, coming to Capitol Hill and utilizing those of us who love and know the continent, whether it is talking to entrepreneurs and thought leaders and creating those connections, whether it is authors rewriting new stories of Africa, whether it is, Idris Elba was here, actors and actresses and filmmakers who are writing our story from a place of joy and celebration and power. When we start to believe in ourselves, I think we are limitless. And there are great opportunities for us to create the kind of investment that the African continent needs if we push for the right partnerships that do not exploit the continent and its people, but enrich the continent and its people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sheree, please.
I think of it often as each individual as a key that's unlocking the option. And so I built a company that was a technology company focused on travel. And we helped people travel to the continent, but we helped them do so through the lens of creatives and entrepreneurs and chefs on the continent. So driving direct income and dollars and mutual experiences into folks on the ground. Now I work in venture capital. I'm on the other side of it. So now there's another unlock. So every day I'm in that room, it's an opportunity to look at African startups. It's an opportunity to look at Black startups. It's an opportunity to say, hey, why don't we fund Black businesses in Brazil? It's an opportunity to say, with all of the interconnectivity that I have as a member of this diaspora who has had the chance to build these relationships, every chance I get is a chance I must use to create the unlock. And I think oftentimes we look at ourselves and our individual paths as singular, but we contain multitudes. And so the opportunity to make that real, whether you're in government, whether you're in business, whether you're just even in your own family, and just really considering yourself a part of this bigger idea and doing the work to make that real and not being afraid to wave that banner. I came down here today, every person at work now knows that this summit is happening. None of them were thinking about it before. And I think just using and taking up the space to do that is really important because we should be past the space of hiding ourselves and making ourselves small. So that's my.
Fantastic. Uzo.
Yeah, so I think a lot about it a lot in terms of storytelling. So I'm a writer, filmmaker, do those things. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is not just, it's not just this idea that there's a single story. It's often that I think people don't know our story. And so then they make up stories, right? And you see that then has real implications within the policy space or the business space where people think of the continent as chaotic. But let me ask right now, are any of our countries any more chaotic than, say, I don't know, certain countries in Europe that are undergoing some bad things right now? Are any of our people any more, dishonest or corrupt than, say, I don't know, people in the United Kingdom? I didn't call them out, but I did. Who are offering no-bid contracts for COVID supplies. These places have stories and narratives that people believe in, right? When it comes to us, people don't know our narratives. So one of the things that I think is most important is, one, getting that data, and that data can be artistic, it can be cultural, it can be the paintings we do, the movies we make, the films, the stories, the music. It can be actual hard data. For example, how are Africans perceived or written about in newspapers? At the Africa Center, which I run, we're doing a study, for example, on how newspapers mention different African countries, people's stories, who writes those stories, where those stories appear, what those stories, whether they get bumped in relation to other stories. Say, for example, does a conflict on the continent get pushed down when you have a conflict in Europe, like what's going on in Ukraine? We do things around, for example, what do we think about things like climate change? What are the stories we're telling ourselves? I've written about this when I wrote about HIV/AIDS. There's a whole narrative that was, the wider world had about us. But we had a very different narrative about ourselves in terms of how we had sex, in terms of how we formed relationships, in terms of how we cared for our sick. But people don't know that. and that's a problem. And so I think one of our main tasks in terms of reorienting people so that they think of us not as a place for charity or help, but as a place for investment, is really telling that story. It's not $100 billion, for example, for loss and damage or whatever nonsense it is they're saying at this point in time. It's $4 trillion for investment in a climate future for the world. That's a very different story that we can own and that we can control if we tell it and if we make sure to keep telling it to anybody who's out there who can listen.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow. I'm going to piggyback off what Uzo said. I read a funny tweet yesterday that said, the president of Africa is in town, so there's a lot of traffic in D.C. And I thought that was pretty interesting. The first baseline, in my opinion, is just education, right? Africans themselves need to be educated about Africans, as in we need to know, I just found out that, people don't really eat plantains like that in South Africa. And Ghanaians, in Ghana, we have so many different languages. There are Gans, there are trees, there are Ewes. In Togo, there's so many different cultures that exist in different countries in Africa, let alone the continent of Africa. So just kind of educating people that Africa has X amount of countries, right? For these countries, Africa has this, these kind of things. And first of all, taking the narrative into our own hands and being able to kind of tell those stories from Ghana's perspective, from Togo's perspective, from Congo's perspective, and Nigeria's perspective. Okay, I'm not going to leave Nigerians out. You're not going to leave Nigerians out, right? And being able to do that. And thank God for technology, right? Technology is allowing individuals in different parts of Africa to communicate to each other in seconds. I remember my parents had to record a video and send it, with somebody going to Africa in order for them to see each other. But now you can FaceTime, now you can actually call somebody for free on WhatsApp, right? Those are things that are very, very important, and leveraging those things are going to change how we interact with each other and how we communicate with the world. Now, what we've built with our festival, Afrochella, has given us an opportunity to find specific connecting points, right? We think food, we think art, we think music, we think fashions are simple things that, and everybody looks fly, by the way. You guys look amazing. And you guys do too, right? We think these are simple connectors that allow people to be able to communicate culture, right? And if we can leverage these things to be able to build bridges, then we should be able to do that. And our festival has leveraged Fortune 500 companies such as Twitter, and some of my partners that allowed us to do that are here, YouTube, right? Meta, some Google, right? We've brought them all to Ghana, and with their help, we've averaged, given up to 1,000 people jobs every December. This year, we were able to expand our operation out of Ghana. We did activations in Cote d'Ivoire and South Africa, and our hope is to continue to do that. And if we continue to do that, we'll foster those relationships that need to be had. We've done partnerships with companies like PVO. We've brought them to Ghana. And now these Nigerians are doing partnerships with local companies like Frontback and Accra. That's a bridge right there that we've been able to build. And our goal is to be able to leverage our platform not only to work with partners, but individuals, and tell them, look, these young individuals are starting businesses like Travis and I spoke about. They have this business. We verified that they're paying taxes. We verified the business is profitable. If you're coming to Ghana and you want to have fun at our festival, you should check out this business. It might be an investment opportunity for you. And that's how we continue to build that dialogue, that relationship building, and that connecting between those on the continent and supporting them without, overarching and trying to take from them. We're building together, a space that we can both, we can enjoy from different angles. And our goal is to continue to do that across the diaspora.
Beautiful, beautiful. Brother Fowler.
Merci.
I think that everyone has spoken so well. I am going to go to the side, but on the good side. I think that I have two things to say. First, in my opinion, the Africans today should be proud to be African. That is, people
Excuse me.
Thank you. First of all, I think everyone expressed themselves very well, but I have two things that I wanted to add for myself. The very first is that today Africans have a lot to be proud of. Proud to be African.
And you not just to be proud of Africa when it's good for you.
You can't just be proud to be African when you feel like it.
And today, if we really were living in the moment of globalization, and technology has brought us a lot of things, and we're thankful for it. But we have to always keep a part of our culture and our authenticity. The things passed down to us by our ancestors are not necessarily bad.
We've gotten a lot of things from the West, certainly, but I think it's extremely important for us to keep our own culture, our own authenticity.
Yeah. Social media, everyone thinks use social media to deal with their problems, and I think that's regrettable.
I think it's important to come back to ourselves as well.
Mais sauf quand il y a des problèmes dans
When there are problems in other African countries, there's no solidarity. I can take my country as an example.
Countries. I'd like to talk about my own country.
We Africans are divided amongst ourselves. For example, our North African friends don't want to be considered as Africans. They're Maghrébins, they're North Africans.
Consider themselves to be part of Africa.
And Central Africa, English-speaking Africa, I think that we should just all be African, period.
We're from North Africa, but that's not what we need to do. Everybody is African, period.
par exemple, pour parler
For example, to talk about my own country, while we are here in Washington, D.C. in the United States, there are people being killed in the eastern part of my country. There are wars. People are being massacred, women, children, because of a war that we don't understand. And today, no one talks about it. I am taking this chance to do so and to transmit the message to the international community, to all these international organizations, because what is going on in Congo is unacceptable. There are too many deaths. It has to stop. Even other Africans, they do not care. No one talks about it. People pretend that they don't see, they don't hear. As an African, I'm proud to be African. I am a child of Congo, and I say to my brothers, we must be together. We must have solidarity.
In the United States, there have been people dying in the east of my country, men, women, children being murdered, and it's not being talked about. No one is talking about it here. And I think it's very important that we get the word out. So that's part of what I'd like to do while I'm here, is to make sure that people are talking about this. It's not acceptable that people are dying in my country and everyone is sort of turning away, pretending it's not happening. So I'm proud to be African, I'm proud to be from Congo, and it's important for all of us to stand together.
Conversation, which we hope will continue. As I think about a closing statement, I would just say that there was a time in which we were together on the continent, and a time in which we were separated. But even in our separation, our fate has always been linked. When the continent was under colonial rule, we were under the hell of chattel slavery in the United States of America. When the continent was embroiled in the anti-colonial movement, our people in America were embroiled in the civil rights movement. And since that time, both fighting on each side of the Atlantic against challenges with governance and access to the democratic ballot, challenges with security forces in our countries and the way that they have put themselves in opposition to our lives and our livelihoods and our success. And so when I think about that linked fate in the past, I also think about it going forward and all we can do together in the future. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists. I wanted to just do a quick word of thanks for everyone who participated in this panel. Your words are precisely why we wanted you to interact with us and to really set the tone for the day. Just as a word of housekeeping, we will now be transitioning to our breakout sessions. So we have the 3 breakout sessions. You can look at your underlay or your overlay to confirm where you'll be heading. If you're heading to the environmental equity or the education breakout session, you'll just take the escalator or the escalator up to the 2nd floor where you'll receive additional instructions. If you are remaining in the theater for the creative industries breakout session, you're welcome to keep your seats. You can also feel free to use the restroom and come back inside. Apologies for the delayed start, but I think we're moving back on time and we're really excited to continue with these robust conversations.